Welcome back to Tales from Outer Space, where we bring you the most intriguing stories from across the galaxy. The host's voice echoed through millions of transmission devices scattered throughout the inhabited worlds. Today, we have a particularly chilling tale about humanity vengeance and the power of a single word. The host paused, allowing the dramatic introduction to sink in. The studio lights dimmed slightly as holographic imagery of distant stars materialized around him. As many of you know, the All Races Alliance has been the governing body of our interstellar community for centuries now. Despite our technological advancements, the universal translation system remains imperfect. Certain concepts, cultural nuances, and terms simply do not translate well across species. But rarely has such a linguistic gap led to such catastrophic consequences as in the story I'm about to tell you. Another calculated pause. The events I'm about to narrate occurred nearly 50 years ago, when humanity had already spread across hundreds of star systems. Back then, humans were known as peaceful explorers, curious scientists, and skilled diplomats. They were respected if sometimes misunderstood. Few could have predicted that they would become the most feared species in the galaxy, all because of that one word. The host's voice dropped to a near whisper. This is the story of how the Draken Dominion made the most fatal mistake in the history of interstellar relations, and how humanity's response forever changed how other species viewed them. The transmission cut to a view of Earth, as it once was blue and green, teeming with life and civilization, orbited by its ancient moon and countless satellites. It began with a linguistic curiosity. High Commander Crixon of the Draken Dominion paced around the strategic chamber, his scaled tail swishing impatiently behind him. The massive reptilian being's amber eyes narrowed as his intelligence officers presented their findings. "You mean to tell me," he growled, "that there is an entire word in the human language that our advanced translation systems cannot interpret?" "Yes, High Commander," responded Intelligence Director Zex Kalag, her smaller frame tense with anticipation of her superior's displeasure. "Our linguistic AI has analyzed billions of human communications across all their languages. One word consistently escapes proper translation. The humans use it frequently when discussing their offspring and educational facilities." "What is this word?" Crixon demanded. "Kindergarten." Zex Kalag pronounced carefully, the alien syllables awkward on her forked tongue. Crixon stopped pacing and tilted his massive head. "And what does it signify?" "That's precisely the issue, sir. The word appears to be of Germanic origin, but has been adopted into most human languages without translation. It seems to reference institutions for their young ones, but our cultural analysis suggests there's a deeper emotional significance that escapes our algorithms." High Commander Crixon contemplated this information. The Draken Dominion had risen to power through military might and technological superiority. They had conquered 17 star systems in the past century alone. Humans, with their fragile bodies and sentimental nature, had always been viewed as potential labor resources, rather than worthy adversaries. "Show me the planet where this concept originated," he commanded. A holographic projection appeared, showing a lush blue planet. "Earth, their homeworld," Zex Kalag explained. "But the term is now used on all their colony worlds. And their defenses. The home system is well protected, but we've identified one of their newer colony worlds, where this kindergarten concept has recently been established. The planet designation is Terra Nova, population approximately 8.5 billion. Their planetary defense systems are still in early deployment stages." A slow, predatory smile spread across Crixon's scaled face, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. "Perfect. The humans have expanded too quickly, spread themselves too thin. I have grown weary of their sanctimonious preaching in the Alliance Council. It's time they learned their place in the hierarchy of species." "Sir," Zex Kalag's voice held a note of concern. "The Alliance Compact explicitly forbids unprovoked aggression against member species." Crixon waved a dismissive claw. We aren't declaring war on humanity. We're simply acquiring resources. One insignificant colony. The Alliance has overlooked our previous acquisitions with nothing more than formal protests. But humans are different from our previous conquests, another officer interjected. They're highly emotional and unpredictable. All the more reason to remind them of their vulnerability, Crixon declared. Prepare the bioweapon and radiation protocols. I want Terra Nova cleansed and ready for Draken colonization within one standard cycle. Leave no survivors. We don't need human slaves for this operation, just their territory. The officers bowed and departed to carry out their commands, leaving Crixon alone with his thoughts. He approached the holographic display, studying the blue-green world that would soon be added to the Dominion's holdings. Kindergarten, he muttered, testing the strange word. Whatever it means, the humans will soon learn that sentiment has no place in a galaxy ruled by strength. The Draken attack on Terra Nova was swift and merciless. Stealth ships entered the atmosphere under the cover of a meteor shower, releasing engineered viral agents designed to target human DNA. As the population struggled with the rapidly spreading pandemic, the second phase began orbital bombardment with radiation charges that rendered the surface uninhabitable while preserving the planet's natural resources. Within 72 hours, Terra Nova was silent. 8.5 billion human lives extinguished in what would become known as the first genocide of a human colony. The news reached the Alliance headquarters on Nexus Prime within hours. Emergency sessions were called. Species representatives gathered in stunned silence as footage of the devastation played on the central projection screen. The Draken ambassador was conspicuously absent. Admiral Hernandez, the human representative, sat motionless, her dark eyes fixed on the images of destruction. Her normally immaculate uniform seemed suddenly too large for her frame, as if the weight of 8.5 billion souls had physically diminished her presence. This is an unprecedented violation of the Alliance Compact, declared the Valerian representative, his crystalline form pulsating with agitation. We demand immediate sanctions against the Draken Dominion. The chamber erupted in voices, some calling for military intervention, others advocating for diplomatic solutions. Through it all, Admiral Hernandez remained silent, her hands clasped so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. When she finally rose to speak, the chamber fell immediately silent. The Human Coalition requests a formal audience with the Draken High Command. She said, her voice steady, despite the emotion evident in her eyes. We would like this meeting to be witnessed by all Alliance representatives. Ambassador Hernandez, the Alliance Chancellor, a towering Altarian with mottled blue skin, spoke gently. Perhaps diplomacy is premature. The evidence of Draken aggression is irrefutable. The Alliance is prepared to support humanity with military. We request a dialogue. Hernandez interrupted something unprecedented in Alliance protocol. Nothing more at this time. The assembled representatives exchanged concerned glances. The humans' calm response to such a catastrophic attack was unexpected and to many unsettling. The Chancellor reluctantly nodded. Very well. We shall arrange this meeting immediately. 3 days later, the Great Hall of the Alliance headquarters hosted the most watched transmission in galactic history. On one side of the massive circular table sat the Draken delegation, led by High Commander Crixon himself, flanked by military officers and diplomats. Their scaled faces betrayed no remorse, only the arrogant confidence of predators, facing what they perceived as weaker prey. On the opposite side sat a single human Prime Minister, Rebecca Chen, of the United Earth Government. Behind her stood a row of 13 individuals each, wearing the formal black attire of human mourning. They represented various human worlds and colonies, a united front of silent dignity. The Chancellor formally opened the proceedings, outlining the evidence of the Draken attack on Terra Nova and citing the relevant violations of the Alliance Compact. Throughout the recitation of crimes, Crixon maintained a posture of bored indifference, occasionally examining his clawed hands or glancing at his officers. When the Chancellor finished, he turned to the human delegation. "Prime Minister Chen, you have requested this audience. The floor is yours." Rebecca Chen rose slowly. She was not a physically imposing figure average height for a human female with silver-streaked black hair, pulled back in a simple style. Yet, as she stood, even the massive Drakens seemed to straighten in their seats. She surveyed the reptilian delegation with dark, penetrating eyes that betrayed no fear, no weakness, only a cold, calculating intelligence. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but carried throughout the hall with perfect clarity. "I have only one question for the Draken High Command," she said. "Why?" Crixon blinked clearly, expecting a lengthy condemnation or emotional outburst. After a moment's hesitation, he leaned forward. "Resources," he stated simply. Terra Nova occupied a strategic position and possessed valuable mineral deposits. The Draken Dominion has expanding needs. It was nothing personal, Prime Minister. Simply the natural order of things, the strong, utilizing what the weak cannot adequately protect. Chen's expression remained unchanged. "I see," she said. She turned to the Chancellor. "The human delegation has no further questions at this time." A murmur of confusion spread through the hall. Crixon's expression shifted from confidence to uncertainty. "That's all," he demanded. "One question." Prime Minister Chen paused at the exit of the chamber and turned back. "For now, yes. You have answered with perfect clarity, High Commander. Humanity will respond in kind." With that enigmatic statement, the human delegation departed, leaving a chamber full of bewildered representatives and an increasingly uneasy Draken contingent. In the 6 months that followed, the galaxy witnessed something unprecedented. Humanity withdrew nearly all diplomatic personnel from Alliance institutions. Human-owned businesses continued to operate, but human workers became scarce. Messages sent to human worlds received only automated responses. It was as if humanity had collectively fallen silent, retreating into a cocoon of grief and contemplation. The Draken Dominion, after initial apprehension, began to relax. Their diplomats proclaimed victory to anyone who would listen. The humans had been taught their place in the galactic order. The loss of one colony, however tragic, would ensure they understood the consequences of expansion without adequate military development. Then, exactly 6 months and 1 day after the destruction of Terra Nova, the pattern changed. The receptionist at the Draken Embassy on Nexus Prime was the first to notice something amiss. The human cleaning staff, who had wordlessly performed their duties for months, did not report for work. Instead, a young human woman in civilian clothing approached the reception desk. "I have a message for Ambassador Drezek," she said pleasantly. "The ambassador does not take unscheduled appointments," the receptionist replied dismissively. The woman smiled. It was not a friendly expression. "Oh, he'll want to hear this one." Before the receptionist could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the embassy. The security feeds displayed impossible images. The embassy's defense shields were failing, and human ships had surrounded the building. The young woman's smile never wavered. "The message is simple: 8.5 billion. Remember that number." Across the galaxy, in perfect synchronization, similar scenes played out at every Draken diplomatic outpost, military base, and trading post. Human civilians, shopkeepers, maintenance workers, service staff suddenly revealed themselves as expertly trained operatives. Draken security forces found themselves outmaneuvered and overwhelmed not by military personnel, but by people they had dismissed as harmless civilians. On the Draken colony world of Crest-the-Ford, the chief administrator was enjoying his morning meal when his assistant burst into the dining room. "The hospitals," the assistant gasped. "They're gone." "What do you mean, gone?" the administrator demanded. "The human medical staff, doctors, nurses, technicians, they've all disappeared. And they've taken all the medical supplies and equipment with them." Similar reports flooded in from across Draken territory. Human educators had vanished from institutions, taking with them critical teaching technologies. Human engineers had departed from power facilities, but not before implementing subtle sabotage that would cause cascading failures in the coming weeks. Human agricultural specialists had disappeared from food production centers, leaving behind crop fields that would soon fail due to carefully engineered biological agents that targeted only Draken-compatible nutrients. The pattern was unmistakable. Humanity had spent 6 months infiltrating every aspect of Draken society, positioning themselves in critical infrastructure roles, only to withdraw simultaneously, leaving carefully planned chaos in their wake. At Draken military headquarters, High Commander Crixon received increasingly desperate reports from across Dominion territory. "This is absurd," he snarled at his officers. "How could we have become so dependent on human workers?" "They filled positions no one else wanted," Intelligence Director Zex Kellogg explained. "Medical workers willing to touch alien bodies, educators willing to teach Draken young maintenance workers, willing to handle the most unpleasant tasks. We didn't realize how many critical systems relied on their presence until they coordinated their departure." "They're just humans," Crixon insisted. "Soft, emotional creatures. They don't have the stomach for prolonged conflict." A junior communications officer interrupted his scales, pale with stress. "Sir, we're receiving reports of attacks on our outer colonies. Not by human military forces, but by civilians." "Civilians," Crixon echoed incredulously. "Yes, sir. Human doctors are using their knowledge of Draken physiology to deploy targeted biological agents. Human teachers are using their familiarity with our young to infiltrate secure areas. Human service workers who maintained our environmental systems have reprogrammed them to create conditions hostile to Draken life, but perfectly habitable for humans." Crixon stared at the tactical display as red alerts multiplied across Draken territory. "This makes no sense," he muttered. "Where is their military? Where are their warships? This isn't how species wage war." Zex Kellogg's voice was quiet. "Perhaps we fundamentally misunderstood them, sir. We attacked what we thought was just another colony. But what if Terra Nova represented something more to them?" That word Crixon suddenly remembered. Kindergarten. Find out what it means. Now, 3 months into what was now being called the Silent War, the galaxy watched in astonishment as the Draken Dominion, a military power that had terrorized the sector for centuries, began to crumble from within. The human strategy became clear. They had no interest in conquest or occupation. Their civilian forces targeted Draken infrastructure supply lines and support systems, then withdrew, allowing the Dominion's own rigid hierarchy and inefficiency to accelerate their collapse. Where was the human military throughout this campaign? The question echoed through Alliance chambers and Draken war rooms alike. Human warships remained in defensive positions around their worlds, neither advancing nor retreating, simply waiting. Finally, 9 months after the destruction of Terra Nova, the human military made its move. The Draken border outpost at Carix noticed the approaching fleet first, not a strike force or raiding party, but the entire combined fleet of the Human Defense Force. Thousands of warships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their weapon systems powered, but not yet targeting. From the flagship, a transmission was broadcast on all frequencies. "This is Admiral Hernandez of the United Earth Navy, to all sentient beings in Draken territory. Our civilian operatives have completed their work. The military phase now begins. Any non-Draken individuals have 48 hours to evacuate to designated neutral zones. After that time, we cannot guarantee your safety." The message was simple, direct, and terrifying in its confidence. There was no ultimatum for the Drakens, no terms offered, no diplomatic overture. Just a coldly delivered evacuation notice for everyone else. In the Great Hall of the Alliance headquarters, emergency sessions convened as representatives debated whether to intervene. The human chair remained conspicuously empty throughout these discussions. "We cannot stand by while one member species annihilates another," argued the Valerian representative. "And yet we stood by when the Drakens annihilated Terra Nova," countered the Tellurian ambassador whose species had suffered under Draken expansion decades earlier. Perhaps this is what justice looks like. The Chancellor called for order. We must attempt mediation. The compact exists precisely to prevent such escalations. A junior aide approached the Chancellor bearing a data tablet. After reading the message, the Chancellor's complexion paled to a lighter shade of blue. Representatives, he announced, I have just received word that the human Prime Minister has agreed to address this chamber. The hall fell silent as the central projection activated. Instead of the expected image of Prime Minister Chen, the screens showed a desolate landscape, the ruined surface of Terra Nova. The camera panned slowly across blackened earth, crumbling structures, and the unmistakable outlines of bodies frozen in their final moments of agony. After nearly a full minute of this grim footage, the view shifted to Prime Minister Chen, standing before what appeared to be a military command center. Members of the Alliance. She began her voice as measured as it had been 9 months earlier. Humanity withdrew from active participation in Alliance affairs to allow us time for contemplation and preparation. We asked the Draken High Command one question, why their answer was illuminating in its honesty, because they could, because we appeared weak, because our resources were valuable to them. She paused, allowing her words to resonate. Humanity has now formulated our response. We will not ask the Alliance for permission or assistance. We will not seek approval for what must be done. We simply inform you as a courtesy that the Draken Dominion, as an entity, will cease to exist within 1 standard year. Gasps and exclamations echoed through the hall. This is not war as you understand it, Chen continued. This is not conquest or territorial expansion. This is justice administered with the full weight of human determination. We ask only that you stay out of our way. The transmission ended as abruptly as it had begun, leaving the representatives in stunned silence. Outside the chamber, billions of beings across the galaxy watched the same message. For the first time, many species began to wonder if they had fundamentally misunderstood humanity all along. The human military campaign against the Draken Dominion proceeded with a precision and ruthlessness that shocked even seasoned Alliance military observers. Human warships bypassed major defensive installations, instead targeting communication hubs, supply depots, and command centers. When they encountered Draken warships, they offered no communication, no opportunity for surrender, just immediate, overwhelming force. Behind the military advance came the civilian specialists, the same doctors, teachers, and maintenance workers who had infiltrated Draken society, now returned to dismantle it methodically. Medical personnel neutralized biological weapons before they could be deployed. Engineers disabled planetary defense systems. Agricultural specialists ensured that evacuation routes remained free of contamination. It was a terrifyingly coordinated campaign, integrating military and civilian expertise in ways no other species had attempted. Most disturbing to outside observers was the absolute silence with which humans conducted their operations. No ultimatums, no propaganda broadcasts, no victory announcements, just the systematic dismantling of an empire that had stood for centuries. 6 months into the military campaign, the Draken controlled only 27 star systems, down from over 200 at the beginning of the conflict. Refugee crises overwhelmed Alliance border worlds as Draken civilians fled the human advance. The humans allowed these evacuations, even escorting civilian transports to ensure their safe passage, but any military vessel that attempted to flee was destroyed without warning. In his increasingly isolated command bunker on the Draken homeworld, Crixa Prime High, Commander Crixon received the latest intelligence reports with growing desperation. We have to negotiate, urged his few remaining advisors. The humans have not stated their terms, but surely they must want something we can provide. They want our extinction, Crixon hissed. Have you seen how they operate? They're not conquering our worlds, they're sterilizing them after evacuation. They're systematically erasing every trace of our civilization. Not erasing, corrected Intelligence Director Zexkalag, who had remained loyal despite the collapse of their empire. Preserving. Their xenoanthropologists are documenting everything, before destruction, our art, our literature, our history. They're creating the most comprehensive archive of Draken civilization ever assembled. To what end? Crixon demanded. I believe they want us to be remembered, she replied quietly. They want future generations to know exactly who we were, what we built, and how we fell. Crixon slumped in his command chair. Have we determined the meaning of that word, kindergarten? Zexkalag hesitated. Yes, sir. Our linguistics division finally completed the cultural context analysis. It refers to educational facilities for their youngest children, typically between ages 3 and 6. But it's more than just a school. It represents a critical phase in human, emotional, and social development. It's where they first learn to interact with others outside their family units, to share, to create, to imagine. Educational facilities. Crixon's voice was hollow. We destroyed a world because of schools for younglings. Not just schools, sir. In human culture, the kindergarten represents innocence, possibility, hope for the future. By targeting Terra Nova with its newly established colonies and young population, we inadvertently struck at something humans consider sacred, the potential of their children. Crixon closed his eyes. Send a transmission to their command. Offer unconditional surrender. Perhaps there's still a chance to save our species. The transmission was sent. No response came. Instead, 3 days later, the human fleet arrived in orbit around Crixa Prime. But rather than immediately beginning bombardment, a different message was broadcast to every communication device on the planet. People of Crixa Prime, this is General Eleanor Torres of the United Earth Forces. Your military installations have been neutralized. Your leadership bunkers have been targeted. In 1 hour, we will begin landing operations. We have one requirement. High Commander Crixon and his senior command staff are to be delivered to the Central Government Plaza. Compliance will not save your world, but it may save your people. You have 1 hour to decide. In less than 40 minutes, a mob of desperate civilians and disillusioned military personnel stormed the command bunker. Crixon and his inner circle were dragged through the streets and thrown before the massive doors of the government plaza, where they awaited the human forces. The landing ships descended with precise formation, touching down in the massive square. When the hatches opened, the Drakens witnessed something unexpected. The disembarking troops were not wearing standard military armor, but rather what appeared to be specially adapted environmental suits in solid black. At their head walked a human female of unremarkable physical stature, but unmistakable authority. General Torres approached the bound form of High Commander Crixon without any visible weapon, yet the Draken leader found himself trembling before her. High Commander, she acknowledged without preamble. Before judgment is passed, you will bear witness. A holographic projection activated in the center of the plaza, displaying what appeared to be a human habitation module. Inside, a human male in a laboratory coat addressed the camera. This is Dr. Samuel Eisenberg, Xenobiological Containment Specialist, Terra Nova Colony. The Draken bioweapon has breached all our defenses. Mortality rate is 100%. Incubation period is approximately 20 minutes. We've lost everyone. His voice broke. The kindergartens went first. The children had no chance. None of our countermeasures worked. I'm recording this from isolation, but I'm already showing symptoms. To whoever finds this message, remember us. Remember what happened here. The projection shifted to another recording, then another dozens of final messages from the dying inhabitants of Terra Nova. Doctors reporting clinical details even as they succumbed. Teachers surrounded by the bodies of their students. Parents cradling lifeless children. The recordings played for over an hour, an unrelenting document of suffering and loss. When the final message ended, General Torres spoke again, her voice steady, but laden with emotion. Of the 8.5 billion inhabitants of Terra Nova, Only 9-723 survived. They were off-world during the attack. This is what you have taken from us. Crixon, broken by the witness of so much suffering, could no longer meet her gaze. We offer unconditional surrender, he whispered. Take our worlds, our resources, enslave our people if you must, but please spare our species. General Torres regarded him with cold eyes. You misunderstand the nature of our response, High Commander. We do not want your worlds. We do not want your resources. We do not want your people as slaves. We want justice. She turned to address the gathered Draken civilians. You have 48 hours to evacuate this planet. Shuttles will be provided to transport you to designated Alliance refugee zones. Take only what you can carry. Everything else will be cataloged in the archives before this world shares the fate of Terra Nova. 1 year to the day after the destruction of Terra Nova, the combined fleets of humanity surrounded Crixa Prime. The planet had been evacuated, every Draken, down to the last hatchling, transported to Alliance territories and refugee settlements scattered across the galaxy. In the Great Hall of the Alliance headquarters, representatives gathered once more to witness the transmission from Human Command. Prime Minister Chen appeared on the central projection, her expression solemn. Today marks the conclusion of our response to the Draken aggression, she stated. The Draken Dominion has been dismantled. Their military capabilities have been neutralized. Their leadership has been held accountable. The camera panned to show Crixon and his senior commanders, now held in transparent containment cells. These individuals will spend the remainder of their natural lives in isolation, with their only company being the complete archive of Terra Nova's final hours, playing on continuous loop. The Chancellor rose from his seat. Prime Minister Chen, while the Alliance acknowledges the grievous wrong done to humanity, we must protest this final action you appear to be contemplating. The Draken homeworld contains historical and cultural artifacts dating back millennia. To destroy it would be an irreparable loss to galactic heritage. Chen's expression did not change. The complete Draken historical and cultural record has been preserved in the Alliance archives. Nothing of value will be lost except the cradle of a civilization that thought nothing of eradicating ours. She paused, then added, The decision is made, Chancellor. This is not retribution. It is consequence. The transmission shifted to a view of Crixa Prime from orbit. Thousands of human warships surrounded the planet in perfect formation. As billions throughout the galaxy watched in stunned silence, the warships opened fire simultaneously. The bombardment continued for 24 uninterrupted hours. When it finally ceased, where Crixa Prime had once orbited, only an asteroid field remained. There was no celebration among the human fleet, no victory transmissions, no triumphant declarations. Instead, the warships formed a solemn procession and departed the system in silence, returning to human territory. The aftermath of what came to be known as the Terra Nova incident reshaped galactic politics. The Alliance, shaken by its failure to prevent both the initial genocide and the retaliatory destruction of the Draken homeworld, underwent comprehensive reforms. New protocols were established for rapid response to aggression against member species. The human military doctrine of integrated civilian military operations was studied in war colleges across the galaxy. But perhaps the most profound change was in how other species perceived humanity. Before Terra Nova, humans had been viewed as diplomatic, creative, and perhaps overly sentimental. Afterward, they were recognized as perhaps the most formidable species in the galaxy, not because of superior technology or physical strength, but because of their singular capacity for collective action and unflinching resolve when threatened. Human diplomatic relations gradually normalized. Their representatives returned to Alliance institutions. Trade resumed. To outward appearances, humanity reintegrated into the galactic community. Yet, there remained one visible reminder of what had transpired. On the anniversary of Terra Nova's destruction, every human world colony and outpost observed what they called the Day of Sorrow. all human activities ceased. Every human, regardless of age or occupation, wore black attire. In public squares, the names of the 8.5 billion lost were projected in continuous scroll. 50 years after the incident, the host of Tales from Outer Space stood before the memorial on what had once been Terra Nova. The planet had been partially terraformed again, although large sections remained uninhabitable. At the center of the habitable zone stood a simple monument, a child's drawing rendered in imperishable materials, depicting a small building with a playground. The word that the Drakens couldn't translate, the host explained to his audience, was kindergarten. To humans, it represented not just an educational institution, but the embodiment of childhood innocence, potential, and hope. When the Drakens destroyed Terra Nova, they didn't just take lives, they extinguished possibilities, futures, dreams. The camera panned across the memorial park, where humans and aliens alike had come to pay their respects. The galaxy learned two critical lessons from the Terra Nova incident, the host continued. First, that language and cultural understanding are not merely diplomatic niceties, but essential components of peaceful coexistence. And second, that beneath humanity's collaborative and creative exterior lies a capacity for unified action that makes them uniquely dangerous when threatened. As the sun set over the memorial, the host offered a final reflection. The humans have a saying, "Never again." It is both a promise to the lost and a warning to the living. The Day of Sorrow is not merely about remembering tragedy. It is about acknowledging the price of ignorance and aggression in a universe where different species will always struggle to truly understand one another. The camera panned upward to the stars as the broadcast concluded. This has been Tales from Outer Space. Remember the stories we share for in understanding our past. We create the possibility of a better future. Across the galaxy, beings of numerous species switched off their viewing devices, contemplating the story they had just witnessed. Many would sleep uneasily that night, their dreams troubled by the image of human warships in perfect formation, executing justice with mechanical precision. Others would find themselves drawn to historical archives, seeking to understand more about the enigmatic species that could be both the galaxy's most enthusiastic diplomats and its most implacable enemies. On 1,000 Worlds, teachers would incorporate the Terra Nova incident into their curricula, ensuring that future generations understood the consequences of cultural ignorance. Linguistic scholars would redouble their efforts to create more nuanced translation systems, recognizing that sometimes a single untranslatable word could contain an entire civilization's values. And on Earth, in what had once been Germany, a small kindergarten continued its daily operations, the children inside playing, learning, and growing, blissfully unaware that the concept they embodied had once been the catalyst for interstellar war. Their laughter, their potential, their innocent joy, these were the things humanity had fought to preserve, the treasures deemed worth any price to protect. In the end, that was the true meaning of kindergarten. Not merely a place or an institution, but the embodiment of a sacred principle that the youngest, most vulnerable members of society deserve protection, nurturing, and the chance to become more than what came before. It was a concept so fundamental to human identity that its violation could transform a diplomatic species into the most ruthless force the galaxy had ever witnessed. That one word, untranslatable by alien algorithms, had revealed a truth about humanity that the galaxy would never forget. In the decades that followed, the remaining Draken population scattered across refugee settlements underwent a profound cultural transformation. The species that had once glorified conquest now emphasized understanding, particularly linguistic and cultural comprehension. Young Drakens were taught the dangers of arrogance and the value of recognizing what other species held sacred. Draken linguists became renowned throughout the galaxy for their meticulous attention to cultural context in translation. Their most significant work, the Untranslatable Lexicon, cataloged words and concepts from over 3,000 species that defied simple interpretation along with extensive cultural analyses to prevent dangerous misunderstandings. The first entry in this monumental work was, of course, kindergarten. The surviving Drakens understood better than anyone that peace in a diverse galaxy required more than technology and diplomacy. It required genuine comprehension of the values that different species would die to protect or kill to avenge. As for humanity, they eventually rebuilt on Terra Nova, creating a world dedicated to education and cultural exchange. The new colony centered around the largest kindergarten facility ever constructed, where children of all species could learn together, ensuring that the next generation would grow up with innate understanding of their galactic neighbors. The most prominent building on the campus bore a simple inscription, written in every known language of the Alliance, that one word. It served as both memorial and promise, an acknowledgement of the past, and a commitment to a future where no species would ever again mistake the depth of humanity's resolve when confronted with a threat to their children, their potential, and their hope.